The champagne glasses clinked around me, the sound echoing in the private dining room. I watched the room of 50 high-powered executives, all celebrating the successful merger I had just secured from Magnus Tech Exhausted. I felt a huge wave of relief and pride wash over me. This deal, this legacy, was a result of 2 years of my sleepless nights. Then my wife, Victoria, and her older brother, Victor, the CEO, approached me. I braced for praise. Victor bypassed me entirely, raising his glass to Victoria. To Victoria, he boomed, for her brilliant support in making this happen. Victoria turned to me, her beautiful face hardening into a look of cold contempt I had never seen. She pulled a stack of crisp legal papers from her purse, divorce documents and a thick non-compete agreement. My family always comes first, Owen, and you always come last. We don't need you anymore. Sign this and leave quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow, stripping the air from my lungs. The entire room seemed to tilt. My hands, which had just secured a billion-dollar deal, began to shake. What the hell just happened to him? I didn't immediately move or speak. My mind, usually sharp and quick, seized up, struggling to process the public execution of my career and my marriage. I am Owen Kent, 42 years old, and a successful engineer who gave up his own startup to merge my life and my genius with Magnus Tech, believing in the dream of building a dynasty with Victoria. Now I saw the truth. My marriage was a business transaction, and I was the expendable asset. The title of my shattered reality screamed in my head. My wife said my family always comes first. You always come last, so My first reaction was cold, deep anger, not sadness. The papers were designed to strip me of the massive stock options I earned, which were set to vest the day after the merger closed. They were discarding me before payday. I pushed the papers back across the table, my voice dangerously even. I'm not signing anything right now, Victoria. Not here. I stood up, feeling every eye on my back, and walked out into the cool night air, leaving the celebratory cheers behind. The true depth of the betrayal lay in the technical details. I realized my emotional investment, my love for Victoria, had blinded me to the glaring corporate trap. For 2 years, Victor, the nominal CEO, had been praised for the technological leap that secured the merger. But the core technology of the new merge system, the Delta Protocol, was my design. I had merged my IP into the company, expecting partnership and trust. Victor, the incompetent heir, couldn't tell the difference between a modem and a microwave. The high stakes. The Delta Protocol had a critical, systemic flaw, a bug that I knew would cause a catastrophic system failure under specific stress conditions. I had designed a workaround and was the only one who knew the bug's exact location. The family was firing the doctor just as the patient was about to crash. My strategic revenge began the moment I got home. I didn't yell. I didn't pack. I went straight to my home office. Victoria, surprisingly, hadn't followed. She was probably still basking in her family's approval. I accessed my private, encrypted cloud. Over the years, because Victor was so forgetful, I had maintained meticulous, time-stamped records of every line of code, every design document, and every internal email proving that the Delta Protocol was my original intellectual property. The non-compete agreement Victoria demanded was meant to silence me, but because they were trying to deny me the equity I earned, they were legally invalidating their own claim to my continued loyalty. I spent 4 hours securing every piece of evidence, not to get my job back, but to completely dismantle their future. The next morning, the gaslighting began. Victoria acted cold and businesslike, completely emotionless about the end of our marriage. Owen, be reasonable. My father insists. We've already had the paperwork drawn up. We'll give you a generous severance, enough for a nice place. She talked about our decade-long marriage as if it were a canceled gym membership. I accepted the papers calmly. I then delivered my first, tiny strategic strike. I had to continue working for 2 more weeks as the final integration was completed. I showed up at the office, wearing a fresh, expensive suit, and walked straight past Victor's desk. I ignored him and Dustin, Victoria's cousin who was head of operations. My presence confused them. They expected me to be hiding in shame. I kept my expression polite but distant, like a highly paid, utterly detached contractor. The tension escalated when Victor tried to control my movements. He called me into his huge and used office. "Look, Owen, good work on the merger, but stay in your lane. We're running a tight ship now. Final sign-offs are going through Dustin. We need you to train him." Dustin was an idiot who spent more time on golf links than in server rooms. I knew this was their attempt to download my knowledge. I smiled politely. "Of course, Victor. But Dustin will need hands-on experience with the legacy code, the Delta Protocol. It's complex." I knew the hidden flaw was in the legacy components. I was giving the incompetent duo just enough rope to hang themselves with. I ensured every technical document I handed Dustin contained subtle, irrelevant errors, guaranteeing they wouldn't understand the system even if they tried. The emotional roller coaster spiked when I found absolute proof of the extramarital affair. I had suspected something, given Victoria's coldness, but the confirmation was a gut punch. I found a hidden, encrypted messaging app on our shared tablet. It contained explicit, affectionate messages between Victoria and Dustin, her cousin, the man she prioritized and promoted over me. The messages revealed they had been involved for months, and the whole plan to sideline me was conceived during one of their late-night meetings. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was a deeply personal humiliation by my wife and her family favorite. The rage was cold, purifying. This wasn't just revenge. It was dismantling a corrupt, incestuous system. My strategy shifted from defense to offense. Now I had proof of infidelity, which would protect my assets in the divorce. More importantly, I had proof that the family's decision-making was compromised by personal, illicit relationships, a massive ethical breach in a publicly traded company. I quietly contacted a trusted, loyal colleague, Marcus, who was an older, ethical software architect at Magnus Tech. I met him for lunch off-site. I didn't reveal the full fraud, but I warned him the Delta Protocol had a critical, unmanaged flaw, and that Victor and Dustin were too incompetent to fix it. I also mentioned I was leaving and asked him to keep his eyes open for the inevitable technical catastrophe. I was sowing seeds of doubt and creating an inside witness. The suspense thickened when Victor and Dustin, panicking over the complex system handoff, started bringing up my stock options. They offered me a meager cash settlement, far less than the vested stock value, to sign the non-compete immediately. "Owen, be smart," Victor condescended. "Take the money now. The stock is volatile." I smiled slightly, remembering the affair and the fraud. "Victor, I'm an engineer. I understand value. I'll wait until the stock vests. I'm legally entitled to it." My refusal infuriated them. They couldn't understand why I wasn't scared. They believed I was just bitter. They didn't know the flaw in the Delta Protocol was set to reveal itself during the highly publicized mandatory stress test next month. I filed for divorce first. This was a critical power move. I cited irreconcilable differences, but made sure my lawyer, a sharp specialist named Mr. Hughes, had the detailed evidence of the affair and financial misconduct ready. The paperwork hit Victoria like a train. She immediately tried to call me, alternating between screaming threats and pathetic, fake apologies. "How dare you file first? Owen, you're going to ruin my reputation." We agreed on a quiet settlement. I ignored all her attempt at contact, knowing her panic was tied protecting her social image, which was her only real asset. My silence was deafening, forcing her to deal with the facts. I was no longer her puppet. The office climate became toxic. Victor was now openly hostile, demanding I finish the training immediately. I used this time to my advantage. I wasn't training Dustin. I was meticulously downloading every non-proprietary diagnostic log and performance metric that would, when analyzed, prove the flaw in the Delta Protocol was systemic and unfixable without my original code. I ensured the logs were tagged with Victor's sign-off codes, framing him with the incompetence. The final step. I secured a highly lucrative contract with a small, specialized consulting firm that focused on salvaging technology after corporate mergers. I was positioning myself as a solution to the catastrophe I was about to create. I walked into Victor's office, handed him my access card, and gave him a calm, professional 2-week notice. effective immediately. My new employer requires my full attention, I stated, ignoring his sputtering rage. The crucial point, the mandatory system stress test was scheduled for the day after my notice period ended. They would be entirely without me, relying solely on Dustin's ignorance to manage a system I designed to fail without my intervention. The satisfaction was immense. I watched Victor's face, usually smug, turn pale with dawning fear as he realized the technical disaster was approaching rapidly, and had just fired the only person who could prevent it. The stress test day arrived. I was home, watching the news coverage on my secure monitor. The test was a highly publicized, essential step before the new stock could be fully released. Victor and Dustin were on the main floor, smiling nervously for the cameras. The test began smoothly. Then, precisely when the system reached the peak data load, the threshold I built the flaw to trigger on, the monitors went black. An internal, proprietary error message, designed to look like a hardware failure, flashed across the main screens. The entire system crashed publicly, freezing billions in corporate assets and causing immediate chaos on the trading floor. The catastrophe was total and instantaneous. The merger stock, which had just been released, plummeted. Victor and Dustin were pulled off the floor by frantic IT teams. I watched, savoring the moment. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my loyal colleague. He sounded terrified. "Owen, it's a disaster. The system is dead. Victor is trying to call you. They think it's a hack." I told Marcus to tell Victor the First was unavailable and to ensure the press knew this was a critical, unmanaged systemic failure. The emotional payoff was the realization that the man who had dismissed me as expendable was now desperately begging for my help to save his family's legacy. Victor called me repeatedly. Finally, I answered. His voice was raw with panic. "Owen, you have to come back. Fix this. I'll give you everything. The senior partner position. Double your stock. Anything. Just tell me what's wrong." I remained calm and professional. "Victor, I'm no longer an employee. You chose Dustin. You said my family always comes first. You always come last. This is your family's problem now." I paused, letting the silence crush him. "However, I am currently consulting for a rival firm that specializes in corporate salvage after systemic failures. We can offer you a contract. My fee is $10 million, non-negotiable, and I get full control of the IT division." The demand was astronomical and calculated to destroy him further. The final betrayal twist was revealed. Victor, desperate, agreed to the fee. He arranged an emergency meeting at the new parent company's headquarters. I walked into the room, not as a desperate former employee, but as a senior consultant of the rival firm, dressed in my sharpest suit. Victoria was there, looking pale and furious. Victor began his pathetic plea for my help. Before he could finish, I activated the main screen and projected the evidence. The code logs proving my ownership of the Delta Protocol, followed by the explicit messages between Victoria and Dustin, proving the ethical and corporate corruption that led to my firing. The room erupted. The executives from the parent company were outraged by the financial betrayal and the professional misconduct. Victoria shrieked, denying messages, but the timestamps and the content were irrefutable. I presented the final fatal evidence, a clean, working version of the Delta Protocol, my original IP, now owned by my new consulting firm. Victor and Victoria committed fraud. I stated clearly. They fired the only person who knew the systemic flaw to steal my stock and hide their corruption. I am the only one who can salvage this merger. But I only work for the parent company, not the Magnus family. The corporate fallout was instant. The parent company's lawyers immediately filed a massive lawsuit against Victor, Victoria, and the Magnus family for fraud, IP theft, and stock manipulation. Victor was immediately stripped of his CEO title. Victoria's reputation was utterly destroyed by the exposed affair and her calculated malice. I was hired on the spot by the parent company, not as a consultant, but as the new, high-powered chief technology officer, the title I was always meant to have. I was given full control and massive stock options that had actually vested. The emotional high was not the money, but a look on Victoria's face as she watched her entire life collapse. She tried to follow me out of the room, begging and weeping. "Owen, please." I'm sorry. I love you. You know I always loved you. It was just the pressure. She reached for my arm. I stopped, pulling away gently. You said I always came last, Victoria. Today, you finally understood what that means. I left her standing there, sobbing, watched by the embarrassed executives. I didn't feel rage anymore, just a deep, cold satisfaction that my self-respect was finally restored. My legal team filed for divorce immediately, citing the clear evidence of adultery and financial misconduct, securing my substantial personal assets and the full vested value of my original stock options. I ensured Victoria walked away with exactly what she deserved. Nothing but the public shame she engineered for herself and the failure of her family's legacy. I received no calls, no contact, and no threats from her or Victor. They were consumed by the lawsuits, the SEC investigation, and the shame. I moved into a small, elegant penthouse with a view of the city skyline, the perfect metaphor for my ascent. I dedicated my time to stabilizing the merger and building my new, ethical, and highly successful division. I was hailed in the tech media as the savior of the merger, the brilliant engineer who exposed the corruption. The man who was told he always came last was now on the cover of Financial Review. The final twist came through Marcus, my loyal former colleague. He called me, laughing. You won't believe this, Owen. Victor tried to launch his own small tech firm. He used a Delta Protocol code, but because he didn't have a fix, his system crashed on the first day. He blamed Dustin. The Magnus family's incompetence was permanent. They couldn't even fail quietly. They failed spectacularly, time and time again, proving my original assessment of their intellectual worth was correct. I realized the greatest victory wasn't the revenge, but the self-respect. I was no longer defined by Victoria's ambition or her father's control. I was defined by my own genius and my own ethical work. The money was secondary to the peace I felt every morning, knowing I built my future on truth, not lies. I threw a small, quiet party to celebrate the finalization of the divorce, surrounded by new, genuine friends and professional peers who respected my talent, not my bank account. I secured the last piece of legal paperwork, a final injunction preventing Victoria and Victor from ever working in the corporate field again due to their proven financial misconduct. This was a final, satisfying act of professional closure. They lost their access to the power and wealth they so craved. I felt the powerful, cleansing sense of poetic justice. They were now the outsiders, watching the world from the last place, while I was leading the company they once tried to control. I stood at the window of my new office, looking down at the massive financial district. My new team was brilliant, ethical, and collaborative. I was running the show, successful beyond the dreams Victor and Victoria ever had. I had secured my worth, not by begging for recognition, but by strategically exposing the rot beneath their facade. The man who was told he always came last had become the undisputed first. I walked away from the past, embracing a future where my value was never, ever up for debate. If you made it this far, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. My worth wasn't defined by the Magnus family seating chart or Victor's CEO title. My story proves that silence can be a weapon, and patience, the patience to wait for the systemic flaw to trigger, can be devastating power. If this resonated with you, if a partner or family has gaslit you into professional invisibility, tell yourself this: your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. Never let your genius be stolen for someone else's corrupt legacy. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Victoria said, I always came last. I became the CTO who bought the company. Share your story in the comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.